Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera, bertemu kembali ke MA Channel. Seperti biasa, anda bersama saya Muhammad Azruddin bin Syaudin, pensyarah bagi program Diploma Kejuruteraan Elektrik, Jabatan Kejuruteraan Elektrik, Politeknik Penulisan. Okey, saya dah sentuh dua siri video berkaitan dengan amali bagi penghasilan program C++. So, untuk kali ini saya akan pergi kepada review yang ketiga untuk amali kerja bagi programming C++, iaitu bagi kita memasukkan ataupun penggunaan algoritma di dalam penulisan pengaturcaraan. Okey? So, tanpa kita membuang masa, kita pergi kepada review video yang telah saya sediakan untuk review kali ini. Okey? So, seperti biasa, sumber video adalah daripada channel YouTube Real Learning. Okey? So, anda boleh tengok ke situ. Banyak contoh-contoh yang diambil dapat memudahkan pemahaman dan cara kerja dalam penghasilan program C++. Okey? So, jom kita saksikan. Di paparan sekarang anda dapat lihat problem statement yang dijadikan sebagai rujukan bagi penghasilan program C++. Dan seperti yang saya telah terangkan pada awal tadi, untuk review video kali ini, penulisan program yang saya bagi penekanan adalah berkaitan dengan penggunaan algoritma di dalam pengaturcaraan C.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with program 3. So we'll come here to File, New, and then come across here to C++ Project, left click, and we'll name this project Program 3 since this is our third program.
So, untuk peringkat awal ni, dia beri penerangan berkaitan dengan langkah-langkah yang telah anda tonton pada seri pertama dan seri kedua macam mana kita nak mulakan penghasilan penulisan program C++.
Under project type, you can leave it as empty project, tool chains, make sure MinGW GCC is selected, and then click on Finish. Okay, so we've got our Program 3 project folder. You can right-click on that, then go here to New, and then left-click on Source File. We want to create a C++ source file. We'll just name it program3.cpp, and then click on Finish. Okay, so now we have our Program 3 source file and we're ready to start typing in some things here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is paste in our problem statement. You won't be able to do this, but maybe you can type in a brief summary or just a little bit of text here, because I'm going to show you how to create a comment in Eclipse. I'm going to go ahead and paste in our problem statement that we saw before, and then I'm going to select all this text here and then hit Control, while holding down the Control key, hit the /.
Okey, dapat anda lihat ini sedikit perubahan dia lakukan pada penerangan video untuk kali ini, di mana anda dapat lihat dia letakkan komen pada bahagian atas. Ini bertujuan untuk mengenal pasti beberapa key point yang penting di dalam penulisan pengaturcaraan. Sekiranya anda tak nak paste komen ini pun tak ada masalah. Anda boleh tulis pada kertas lain. Tapi untuk speaker bagi video ini, dia letakkan ni sebagai perkara di atas. Seperti yang saya telah terangkan tadi, reminder kepada dia dalam mengenal pasti beberapa key point dalam penulisan pengaturcaraan.
And that creates a comment out of all this text here. Okay, so what exactly is a comment? A comment is just simply text within our source code file that we as humans, developers, other people that may be looking at the code can read, but it's going to be ignored by the compiler. So when we go and compile program3.cpp, any line that starts with this // is going to be ignored. It's not going to try to compile that into some machine code. So what do you traditionally find in comments? You'll usually find maybe a description of the program, what it does, maybe the author, the date that it was created originally, maybe the last date that it was modified. And also you'll find comments associated with certain portions of the code, maybe explaining why a particular calculation was used or a particular factor was used in a calculation that maybe is outside the norm. But it's not going to be a comment explaining every single line of C++ code and what it does. The code itself should be self-documenting, so someone that understands how to write a particular program in a particular language would need to have an explanation of the syntax. They may need an explanation of why a particular calculation was used or how the algorithm may work in general. So that's the basic idea behind comments. It's just some sort of text within our program source file that's for us, providing maybe a description or further explanation of something, and it's going to be ignored by the compiler.
Okey, seperti yang telah diterangkan oleh speaker untuk video ini, dia telah menyatakan di bahagian atas itu adalah komen saja. Dia tidak akan memberi kesan kepada compiler bagi program yang telah kita hasilkan. So, tak ada bagi kesan apa-apa. Tak ada arahan yang dapat dilaksanakan melalui komen bahagian di atas.
Okay, so let's take a look back at the problem statement and try to devise a basic algorithm for our program. So we need to create a program that displays the average scores from Metacritic's Metascore, Rotten Tomatoes Tomato Meter for a particular movie. The average score must be displayed on a 10-point scale, and the movie title and scores will be inputted by the user. So traditionally, whenever we first start analyzing a problem statement or some sort of requirement specifications for a program, is to figure out the inputs that we're going to have. So it looks like we have 3 different pieces of information that need to be inputted. One is the movie title, and the other 2 are the scores, one from Metacritic's, the Metascore, and another one from Rotten Tomatoes Tomato Meter.
Jadi, untuk seterusnya ini, speaker menyenaraikan beberapa key point penting yang perlu dititik beratkan di dalam penghasilan pengaturcaraan ni. Seperti yang saya telah terangkan pada awal tadi, programming untuk kali ini adalah kaedah bagi penulisan penggunaan algoritma.
So once we have that information, then we can calculate the average score, and we may also have to condition that score so that it fits on a 10-point scale. We'll see what Metascore and Tomato Meter scores give to us, and then from there we can worry about our scaling. All right, so now let's look at trying to just sketch out the basic algorithm without actually writing any code. So we'll come here and say, well, the first thing maybe we need to do is get the name of the movie.
Seterusnya, speaker ini menyenaraikan key point penting yang telah dinyatakan pada bahagian atas paparan ini. So, speaker menyenaraikan key point tersebut dan jadikan dia sebagai komen. Seperti yang saya telah maklumkan tadi, komen-komen ini penting sebagai reminder kepada kita ataupun kepada orang yang akan menyelenggara program yang kita lakukan.
And then we also need to get the Metascore. So I'll say get Metascore. And then we need to get the other score. So get the Tomato Meter score. And then we'll get the average, or we'll calculate the average. So we need to get the average of those 2 scores. And then we may need to do some rescaling. So we'll just say rescale average. And then once we rescale the average, we're ready to actually display the new average, or display it. So we'll just say display the result of our calculations, maybe. And that's basically it. So all the stuff here is a description of our algorithm without actually writing any C++ code. And what we call this is pseudocode. So oftentimes whenever you're in early code development, you want to just sketch out what you want to do without actually writing any specific code. So this just gets you thinking about the problem. Okay, so now that we have our pseudocode in place, let's go ahead and start actually writing some C++ code.
Setelah menyenaraikan beberapa maklumat-maklumat penting di dalam penulisan programming, ada step yang seterusnya dia akan memulakan penulisan programming. Di sini saya akan terangkan beberapa langkah-langkah asas di dalam penulisan programming ini. Sekiranya anda nak rujuk berkenaan dengan penerangan yang telah saya berikan, boleh rujuk pada siri yang pertama dan siri yang kedua.
So we'll go here below the problem statement and put in our pound include statement. So pound include IOStream is going to be the first one that we include so that we have support for getting input from the keyboard and also doing output to the screen. We want to have support for the string data type, so let's include string. And let's also do the using namespace standard. Save us a few keystrokes. And now we're ready to start typing in the main function. So int main open paren close paren, and then I'll put an open brace here and then come down below and put a close brace. So now inside of this main function, we still have all of our pseudocode, and I'm going to just tab the pseudocode over. Basically, anytime we have an open brace, close brace, anything inside of that should be coming over one level of indentation. So I'm just using the tab key to tab all this over. Okay, what we're going to do is start filling in the blanks here, filling in this section below each of the comments. So in order to get the name of the movie, we're going to actually prompt the user of this program to input the movie name. So the first thing we need to do is actually declare a variable that's going to be able to hold the name of the movie. So I'm going to just introduce a data type of string, or variable of type string, and we'll call it movie, and we'll set it to the empty string.
Okey, seperti yang telah saya terangkan pada nota-nota saya sebelum ini, string adalah merujuk kepada selain daripada penggunaan nombor. Di situ kalau anda perhatikan, string movie. So, di sini dia akan mengenal pasti nama movie yang dimasukkan oleh pengguna.
Okay, and then we'll display to the user using our cout and ask them what is the name of the movie. Okay, and we can put a colon space \n for a new line character, and then a semicolon at the end here. Okay, so now that we have the prompt for the user to enter in the name of the movie, we need to be able to read in input from the keyboard. So usually what we've done is just use cin and then the extraction operator and then specify the name of the variable where we want to store that input. Unfortunately, this cin and then the extraction operator is only going to get the first word of the movie. So if it's a multi-word movie title, we're only going to get the first word. So we need something else besides what we have here. And we can make use of a function called the getLine function, and that will actually get an entire line. So what we have to do is specify two arguments to this function. So the first argument is going to be where we're getting it from. So we're going to be getting it from the character input stream, or the keyboard, so we can just say cin. And then where do we want to store it to? So that's the second argument. So the second argument is going to be movie. That's the variable that we've declared previously, and we want to store whatever the name of the movie is into that particular variable name.
Satu lagi command yang digunakan iaitu getLine. Seperti yang telah anda dengar tadi, fungsi dan peranan ataupun peranan getLine ini adalah untuk mendapatkan maklumat keseluruhan input yang dimasukkan oleh pengguna. Ini disebabkan sekiranya kita gunakan cin saja, dia hanya akan membaca perkataan yang pertama sahaja. Ini disebabkan juga kebanyakan movie sekarang pun menggunakan lebih daripada satu perkataan. Jadi, penggunaan getLine ni akan memastikan data yang dimasukkan oleh pengguna dapat disimpan secara keseluruhannya. Contoh satu movie yang panjang saya ambil di sini seperti Robin Hood. Jadi sekiranya kita tidak menggunakan getLine, dia hanya akan mengenal pasti filem yang bernama Robin saja. Padahal kita nak masukkan Robin Hood. Jadi kita menggunakan getLine, dia akan membaca keseluruhan masukan iaitu Robin Hood. Situ anda dapat perhatikan arahan dia adalah getLine, buka kurungan cin. So dia akan membaca maklumat yang dimasukkan oleh pengguna melalui cin dan koma movie. Maklumat yang telah dimasukkan oleh pengguna tersebut akan disimpan pada lokasi movie.
Alright, so that's pretty basic. This is our first time that we've actually called a function. So basically in terms of calling a function to make use of it, you specify the name, and if they have any arguments that have to be specified, those are specified within the parentheses here. Okay, so we've got basically all the code that we need to get the name of the movie. And now we'll come down here and get the meta score. So
Penerangan seterusnya yang diberikan oleh speaker adalah bagaimana penggunaan algoritma di dalam penulisan programming C++.
Meta score is going to be an integer value. So we'll just declare an integer variable, int, and we'll just say meta score, the name of the variable, and we'll initialize that to 0. And then we'll have some output to the user. So cout and then the insertion operator, and we'll say what is the Metascore, rating, or and we'll come in here and use our insertion operator, use our variable called movie, and then maybe question mark /n for a new line character. Okay, so this is just a prompt that we're going to have, then the input the rating from Metascore.
Untuk penggunaan INT situ, seperti yang saya telah terangkan pada penerangan nota saya sebelum-sebelum ni, jika anda nampak penggunaan INT, ini bermakna program ini hanya membaca maklumat berkaitan dengan nombor. Dan pada cout pula, anda dapat perhatikan what is the Metascore rating for, dan anda dapat perhatikan movie. Jadi di situ, movie itu akan merujuk kepada maklumat yang telah dimasukkan oleh pengguna sebelum ini yang telah disimpan pada lokasi movie.
And then once they've done that, we can then read in that value. We can go back to using our CN in this case, since it's just a single value. It's not going to have any spaces or multiple words or anything like that. So we just type in Metascore here. Okay. And it's going to be very similar down here for the tomato meter score. So it's almost the same exact lines. We'll just change up the variable name and a little bit on the string literal that we're going to have there. So we'll say int tomato meter, and we'll assign that to 0. And then we'll do cout, use the insertion operator, and we'll say, what is the tomato, let's capitalize that, tomato meter rating for, and then we'll use movie, and then we'll put in a question mark, /n, the new line character, and a semicolon.
Dan untuk key point yang ketiga ataupun maklumat yang ketiga yang telah kita jadikan sebagai komen iaitu get the tomato meter. Jika anda perhatikan, kaedah penulisan sama sahaja untuk Metascore. Akan tetapi dia hanya tukarkanlah Metascore kepada tomato meter. Tapi anda jangan tanya saya apa beza tomato meter dan Metascore. Ini salah satu permasalahan yang cuba diselesaikan oleh speaker Realme yang terdapat di negara dia lah. Negara kita maybe lain.
And then we'll actually read in a value from the keyboard. So CN, extraction operator, and then we'll use our variable tomato meter. And that's basically it. So at this point in time, we've got the input for the name of the movie. We've got the score from, or the rating from Metascore, and we also have the rating from Tomato Meter. So we've got our input, and now we can actually go in and calculate our average. So in these next couple of lines of code that I'm going to write, I may make some mistakes on purpose, and then we'll come back and look at it. But oftentimes, in terms of learning something, if you exhibit the problem first and then come back and correct it, it's more impactful.
Okey, so untuk seterusnya, speaker akan menunjukkan bagaimana kita menggunakan arahan algoritma di dalam penulisan pengaturcaraan C. Dan seperti yang telah anda dengar juga, speaker akan cuba melakukan kesalahan supaya dapat mengenal pasti beberapa kesilapan yang kita boleh lakukan semasa penghasilan programming C++ ini dengan menggunakan algoritma.
In terms of getting things right later. Okay, so how do we go about calculating the average? So the average is just going to be the summation of some values and then dividing by the number of values that we have. So a pretty basic calculation. We'll need to have a variable to actually store the result of our calculation. So we can think about just a basic expression. What are we wanting to do? We're wanting to take the Metascore and the tomato meter score, add those up, and then divide by 2 since there's 2 scores there. So we can think of maybe an expression like this, Metascore plus tomato meter, and then we want to divide by 2. Now we have to be careful here with this division here. We have to remember our order of operations. So we know that we do anything in parentheses first, then we do exponents, then multiplication, division, and then addition and subtraction, working from left to right. So the way it's specified here, would actually do this division operation before we did the addition. We actually want to sum these values first. So we should probably put parentheses here so that we construct parentheses around some particular operation that we want to do before some other operation to override the operator precedence of multiplication before, or excuse me, division before addition here. So we do what's in parentheses first. And what we need to do is assign this particular calculation here to a variable. So I'm going to just assign it to an int variable called average, AVG, and make sure that our statement ends with a semicolon. So we have a valid statement here in C++ to calculate the average. Okay. The other thing that I'm going to point out here is that Metascore and Tomato Meter, they both offer values that are on a 100-point range as opposed to a 10-point range. So this is where we need to rescale the average that we come up with from a 100-point range to a 10-point range. So basically we're taking whatever value we calculated here and we're going to have to divide it by 10. So down here under rescaled average, I'm going to declare a new variable. We'll call it rescale, maybe rescaled score. Maybe that's a good variable name. And we'll take the average that we previously calculated and divide it by 10. So that rescales it onto a 10-point scale. And for displaying the result, it's just going to be a cout. And then we'll say our calculated, calculated average on a 10-point scale for, and we'll put in the name of the movie here, and we'll say is space, let's see, and then put in the variable rescaled score. All right. And then we can put a period here at the end. If you prefer, you can put this on multiple lines, so anytime you see this insertion operator here, you can hit return before or after the insertion operator, and it'll just put it on the next line. So that way our line is not too long. That's our last bit of code that we need to have. One thing else that we probably should do is have this return 0. If we don't put that return 0 in there, it will be okay by default. Main, if you in C++, if you don't have a return statement in there, it will default to a return 0 statement. You may end up with some sort of warning from whatever editor or whatever integrated development environment that you're using. Okay, so it pretty much looks like we're ready to save and build our program, but before we do that, let's go ahead and calculate what the scaled average would be on a 10-point scale for a particular movie if we were to use the Metascore and the Tomato Meter score. So we want to be able to come up with a particular test case, see what the value would be, and then when we run our program, we can test our program against the value that we expect to receive. So I've already pulled up a movie here, The Incredibles, on both Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic, which has the Metascore. And so on Metascore, it has a score of 90, and then on Rotten Tomatoes, it has a tomato meter score of 97. So let's just pull up our calculator here and say 90 plus 97. And then that gives us the summation that we're going to do. And then we'll divide that by 2, which is 93.5. And then we'll divide that by 10 to get our scaled score. So we would expect to get a result of 9.35 from our.
Okey, di sini speaker menerangkan bagaimana kita nak memastikan programming yang telah kita tulis tersebut adalah satu programming yang betul dari segi pengiraan algoritma ataupun pengiraan matematik. Dia buat secara manual dulu, jadi kita dapat tahu betul tak betul. Okey?
Program if it's working correctly. So let's go ahead and go back in here to Eclipse and run this program. So first we need to save it, and then we will build it.
So jangan lupa sebelum kita run program kita save program tersebut supaya barang perubahan yang telah kita buat tadi telah disimpan dengan baik. So kita save lagi sekali dan jangan lupa tanda tukul tersebut untuk kita build kita punya program.
So during the build phase, we're doing the compiling and the linking operations. It doesn't look like we have any problems.
Dapat perhatikan situ, tiada sebarang syntax error ataupun error yang telah dinyatakan di bawah tersebut. Ya, ini secara langsung menunjukkan program yang ditulis ini betul berpandukan kepada command dan arahan-arahan kita gunakan di dalam program ini.
So let's go ahead and run this.
So, setelah kita tengok tak ada error, tak ada sebarang perubahan yang perlu kita lakukan, selesai je build, kita tekan kepada ikon run kita.
Okay, so if we look down here at the console, we'll see the prompt of what is the name of the movie. So the name of our movie is The Incredibles. So type that in, hit enter, and then it says what is the Metascore rating for The Incredibles. So the Metascore rating was 90. So type that in and hit enter. And then we have what is the tomato meter rating for The Incredibles. So that was 97, and then we'll hit enter. So looks like for our program, it says our calculated average on a 10-point scale for The Incredibles is 9, and it has a dot there, and that's actually the period. It's not even representative of a decimal point. It's just the period that ended our sentence here. So it's not exactly what we were expecting. We were expecting to get 9.35. So
Output yang diperolehi daripada program ni hanya terdapat nombor 9. Di mana kalau kita tengokkan tadi, sebentar tadi, hasil daripada kiraan oleh speaker sepatutnya dapat 9.35. Di sini kalau anda perhatikan pada nota-nota ataupun video pengajaran saya telah terangkan sebelum ni, ada saya terangkan bagaimana kita nak masukkan titik perpuluhan. So kita tengok bagaimana speaker ni memasukkan arahan bagi mengenal pasti titik perpuluhan pada output kita.
let's go back and look at our program where we're actually calculating the average and rescaling the average. So what you'll notice here, if we look at this closely, we have a data type over here on the left-hand side of this assignment operation of an int. So we're saying that the average is an int data type. And what do we know about int data types? Well, those are representative of integers, so they do not store fractional parts. So if we calculate an average here, and we know that the average can have a fractional part. If we were to take some set of numbers and divide them by some other number, we can end up with a fractional part. We're losing that. That's being truncated or lost whenever we store it to this variable over here because it's not capable of storing a fractional part. So what we can do is change this particular data type.
So, speaker telah mengenal pasti salah satu sebab kenapa hanya dapat satu nombor bulat saja. Pada hakikatnya, program yang telah ditulis ini tak salah. Betul. Sebab kalau anda perhatikan tadi, tiada syntax error yang dinyatakan pada bahagian bawah programming kita. So, betul sebenarnya program ini. Tak salah. Akan tetapi, sepatutnya kiraan perlu menghasilkan 9.35. Dan sekiranya 9.35 itu dibundarkan, memang akan dapat 9. Jadi, speaker telah mengenal pasti kesilapan yang telah dilakukan oleh beliau adalah beliau menggunakan int, di mana int ini mewakili integer. So, dia hanya mengenal pasti satu nombor saja, itu nombor bulat. Dia tak kenal pasti nombor perpuluhan. So, di sini speaker telah mengenal pasti dan akan menukar penggunaan int kepada yang lebih sesuai.
To being a data type that can preserve or save a fractional part. So one of the types that we looked at that can do that is the double. So let's change this to double. And let's also do the same thing here for rescale average. So we need to be able to preserve it there. Because if you preserve it here and then you go and divide by 10 on this next line and then store it back into an integer value, you're going to lose whatever fractional part you had again. All right, so let's go ahead and save this. And we'll build it again. And then we'll run it again. All right, so let's go back through and we'll type in the name being The Incredibles. The Metascore rating again was 90. And the tomato meter for The Incredibles was 97. So this time it says our calculated average on the 10-point scale for The Incredibles is 9.3. So still not the 9.35 that we were expecting. So something else is going on.
Okey, di sini speaker menggunakan double. Kalau anda perhatikan, di mana speaker untuk video ni, dia saja menggunakan beberapa arahan integer. Di mana beliau sebenarnya tahu. Cuma dia nak menunjukkan kepada anda, kepada kita semua, bahawa penggunaan double apa kesan dia pada output. Dan jika anda perhatikan di sebelah sana, output yang akan dapat hanya 9.3. Di mana sepatutnya speaker nakkan jawapan yang dihasilkan adalah 9.35. So kita tengok apa langkah-langkah seterusnya yang dilakukan oleh speaker.
And what's going on is if we look at this line of code here, we have Metascore plus tomato meter divided by 2. Well, that looks like, it should give us an average that has a fractional part. But something subtle is going on behind the scenes, or maybe not so subtle if you actually understand it. So Metascore is an integer value because we typed in 90. Tomato meter was also an integer value. Since we specified that both of those were integer values, it was 97. And whenever we add those together, it's also going to be resulting in an integer value. And this 2 here is an integer literal. So whenever we perform this division here, what's going on is it's performing what we call integer division, since we have an integer both in the dividend and the divisor. So the result is also going to be an integer. That's just what it is. So the way that we need to change this is that we can make either the dividend a double or the divisor a double. It really doesn't matter which one, because if one's a double, then the operation that it will do will actually preserve the fractional part. So what we can do is actually cast maybe the value here, Metascore plus tomato meter, to be a double value. And the way we can go about casting is just doing an open paren, double, close paren. So what this effectively is saying is, for this particular operation, make this stuff here to be of type double. So whenever we have a double here and a double, or excuse me, an int here, it will automatically do a division operation so that it preserves the fractional part. So we can see that that works. Let's save this, click on the build button, and then we'll run our program again. And this time the name of the movie once again is going to be The Incredibles. And then we have the Metascore rating, which was 90, and the tomato meter rating, which was 97. So our calculated average on a 10-point scale for The Incredibles is 9.35. So we get.
So anda dapat perhatikan situ di mana hasil yang dihasilkan di sini adalah 9.35. Seperti yang telah anda perhatikan tadi, speaker menggunakan double untuk hasil tambah Metascore dan tomatometer adalah disebabkan, kalau anda perhatikan tadi, sistem mengenal pasti Metascore dan tomatometer adalah satu nombor integer. So untuk memastikan sistem mengenal pasti bahawa proses hasil tambah untuk Metascore dan tomatometer ni akan menghasilkan dua nombor titik perpuluhan. Jadi speaker menggunakan arahan double sebelum operasi tambah di antara Metascore dan tomatometer.
The expected result this time. Now I did say that we could have also made this 2 value a double. And one of the easiest ways to make this 2 value a double is to just do .0. So the decimal point 0. So this makes this a double literal. Anytime in our program where we have a value and it has decimal point, it's automatically seen as a double value. So if you wanted to, you could get rid of this. It doesn't matter that it's there, but we could get rid of that. And so you have a double here, and you have an int here. And since you have an int and a double, it's going to automatically promote this to being a double and perform double division so that we have a fractional part. So let's go ahead and save that, build it, and then run it. All right, so again, the name is Incredibles. The Metascore rating is 90, and the tomato meter score is 97. And so again, we get the same exact result. We get 9.35. So that was our expected result.
Selain daripada itu, cara yang paling mudah untuk kita dapatkan nombor ataupun result seperti di sebelah sini, 9.35 tersebut, speaker ni menggunakan cara yang paling mudah di sini, iaitu kita menggantikan 2 tersebut kepada 2.0. Secara tak langsung, program yang kita tulis ini akan mengenal pasti hasil tambah tersebut perlu dalam bentuk titik perpuluhan. Jadi tak perlulah kita type double ataupun kita letak command double pada bahagian sebelum hasil tambah Metascore dan tomatometer. Lebih mudah di sini. dan penulisan atau cara kita tidak terlalu panjang. Untuk video kali ini, kalau anda perhatikan dan dengar seperti yang telah diterangkan oleh speaker video ini, menerangkan terdapat beberapa perkara telah dirangkum untuk amali kali ini. Selain daripada penggunaan algoritma, kita dapat mengetahui kaedah ataupun cara kita nak letak komen pada kita punya atur cara. Di mana komen ni penting untuk memudahkan kita menghasilkan atur cara dan juga untuk penyelenggaraan pada masa akan datang. Selain daripada itu, penggunaan arahan-arahan lain. Bagaimana kita nak hasilkan nombor dengan 2 titik perpuluhan pada output kita daripada penggunaan integer sehingga penggunaan double. Dan untuk meringkaskan lagi, seperti yang saya telah terangkan peringkat akhir tadi, idea daripada kita guna double pada peringkat awal sebelum hasil tambah metascore dan tomatometer, kita juga turut boleh gunakan 2.0 saja. Lebih mudah atau cara kita pun tidak terlalu panjang. So itu sahaja video amali yang ketiga ataupun video review amali yang ketiga untuk subjek Fundamental Programming DEC20012. So diharap dengan penerangan ini dapat memberikan anda sedikit sebanyak berkenaan dengan penggunaan algoritma di dalam penulisan pengaturcaraan C++. So terima kasih kerana menonton sehingga habis video ini. Jadi saya harap video ini dapat membantu anda dalam penulisan pengaturcaraan. So kepada anda semua, jangan lupa untuk like, subscribe dan tekan butang lonceng kat sebelah saya ni. Okey? Supaya anda dapat notifikasi terkini ataupun maklumat terkini berkenaan dengan video-video yang saya akan upload di dalam MH ini. So, bertemu lagi kita dalam konten-konten yang akan datang. Sekian sahaja daripada saya. Assalamualaikum.